Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is you're watching or listening in, thank you for stopping by the Martal Group Fireside Chats, where each week we peel back the onion layers known as sales and marketing and try to uncover some secrets from industry professionals. This week, we sit down with one of our own, Martal Group's Vice President of Sales Operations, Mr. Edd Young.
But the one thing I would probably say would be good advice for any VP, you have to remember that people work for people. They're just people. I have a constant reminder that people are just trying to figure it out. So you have to have patience with people. Something that is different here at Martal is I'm repeatedly told everybody's getting second chances, right? Everybody gets a second chance. It's interesting that you ask that question, and what advice would I give somebody is to be patient with people. They learn differently. They consume information differently. And truthfully, if I want to be honest, like a high D personality like I am, that only accounts for like 9% of the world's total population, right? So that must mean that I need to accommodate for the rest.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Ted Lasso?
Of course. Yeah.
He says a saying in there, and it's, I hope that either all of us or none of us are judged by the actions of our weakest moments, but rather by the strength we show when and if we're given a second chance.
Now, Ed has been involved in sales and operations for the past 20 years or so, and he's got a wealth of information locked up in his head. That was just a small taste of what you're about to listen to within this podcast. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fireside Chats with the Martal Group. My name is Chris Davis, your host, and I'm joined here today by a special guest. Now, normally when we've done these first couple podcasts, we've had some outside folks, previous partners, folks that we know, industry experts, right, on this podcast just to get their insight. For this episode, I decided to switch it up just a little bit and find somebody internally within the Martal Group just to hear a little bit about his expertise, his experiences, so on and so forth. And I think you guys are really going to like this one. So I'd like to welcome to the stage, to the podcast, Mr. Edd Young. Ed is spelled with 2 D's for anybody that is absolutely curious out there. This man is super handsome, first off, has a great beard, and I'm a little jealous of that. But all-around expert, all-around expert in what he does. He's very seasoned in the sales space and the marketing space. Currently the Vice President of Sales Operations here at the Martal Group, responsible for the oversight of a lot of different people. I don't want to give away too many details, Ed, but first off, thanks for coming on with me, man.
Thanks. I hope I don't mess up your fancy podcast.
Oh, it's not fancy. We're just here to have a little fireside chat and spread the love of some information, right?
But seriously, thanks for the handsome comment. I've been growing out my hair, and I really it's a whole new world for me. I haven't had long hair in like 20 years, so
well, hey, you're doing a good
that
job.
boosts my self-confidence, man. I appreciate that.
There you go. I got to get you an upper before we really start diving into things. So, Ed, just real quick, if you wouldn't mind, just give a quick little background on yourself. Maybe like what your career path has been. I know that you've been involved in sales at a number of different levels over the course of your career. I know that you also kind of served in the Army, right? I got that right?
Yeah.
So there's probably a little bit of that influence that carries over into your sales experience. So talk about yourself here. What's your background?
Wow. I mean, I have a very different background. I got so many things going on in my background. It's crazy. But I mean, you mentioned the military. So yes, I am ex-military. My last MOS was a chaplain's assistant. It was the holy man's right hand or bodyguard, depending on the situation. As for sales, I mean, I actually ran away from sales as much as possible because my dad turned wrenches for a long time, as long as I've ever known him. And he's like, that boy's going to be a salesman. And I always wanted to, I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm never going to be a salesman. But sales did come after the Army. I'm more of an operational person because of the Army. More of my organizational skills are because of honestly what my dad gave me. He gave me a hell of a great work ethic, right? And so sales, I've been doing sales for probably 15 years, 16 years, operations for 20 years. And that sales has really become, I developed my sales in credit and collections, right? That's so weird, right? Like, yeah. I hung out with the salespeople, and I was supposed to be collecting the past dues. And I could never do it until I spoke to a salesperson. I was like, man, you just got to make a friend. You got to convince them the reason why. I mean, that's pretty low key sales, but
Right.
I really started looking at negotiation and didn't really start developing it until right before Martel, with Sandler sales training. But yeah, I've had many different jobs, master at none. But I mean, I'm good at some things. Martel, I started 4 years ago as I think employee or contractor number 6 or
Hmm.
7 or something like that. Vito said, "Hey, I need a guy to help me offload some of my processes." And I was like, "Cool, I love operations." I didn't think I'd be getting into the sales side of it, but we've grown into this organization over the last 4 years, learning new ways to sell things, do things. It's been a ride because none of us really knew what to do. I think Vito knew what to do, and we all just kind of learned from him. So that's my background here at Martel.
There you go.
I've been along for the ride.
And just, for a little bit of context here too, I remember my interview with you, Ed, back when I was getting hired with the company and everything like that. And the thing that I found most unique about that interview was your kind of approach to the questions that you asked. It wasn't necessarily trying to figure out like if I knew the right answer. At least this is how it felt to me. Please tell me if I'm wrong. But it wasn't necessarily if I knew the right answer. It was how I answered that question. And there's a lot of that has to go into understanding personalities, right? And this is where it kind of gets back to Sandler training, is understanding the personalities behind that, understanding how somebody goes about an answer, because you can tell a lot about a person just by listening, really.
And you know what? That's 100% right. I don't know if I ever shared that with you, but I never really cared about the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I just cared about how somebody was answering them. I did a lot of interviewing. I worked for a large corporation as a credit and collections manager. I remember one time I had to interview like 90 people in 1 month. It was horrible. And at that point, I was just like, I no longer care what the questions are. I just want to see how you answer them. And so I started asking crazy like Google questions like, why is a manhole cover round? That one stumps a lot of people. But I just wanted to see if they were going to dig in or, justify in their mind how to answer the question. That's what I was really interested in. That's a great question. I don't even know how
I
it came up.
actually remember that question, and if anybody out there who's listening,
Did I ask that question?
You did, and I remember like kind of riffing off a little bit of like just what I thought was the right answer, and I think the actual right answer is because the manhole cover itself, like if you like turn it on its side or something, right? Isn't the actual answer is if
a circle won't turn inside of itself, right? Like if you had a square and it went sideways, it would go inside itself.
Yeah.
But a circle doesn't. So it's like a safety protocol.
Yeah. So, and I think most people will tend to answer, as if that's like the easiest. It's like the smallest, most efficient shape that a person could fit down if you needed to do that. I think that's maybe the direction I took. But I do remember that question, and I remember you specifically after that just saying, I don't care about what your answer was. There's probably a million reasons why a manhole's designed in a certain way, but this is why I asked that question. You kind of point blank told me in the middle of the interview. So I think that kind of translates into what I want to kind of dig into a little bit more. Ed, is what to look for. You're a seasoned person in doing a lot of interviews. I know you work with a lot of the sales executives here at Martel. What are you looking for when you're going through the hiring process? And maybe not just specific to Martel, but you're trying to hire a salesperson. Like, what specifically are you looking for? Is it personality? Is it answering the right questions? Like, where does that begin for you?
I guess it all begins on mindset, right? I mean, that's where almost everything begins, at least for me. If I was going to write a self-help book, that's where it would start. But when I'm talking to somebody, I usually don't, and you might remember this, I don't even look at the interview card or the resume. I start talking to the person. I mean, eventually I'll ask those questions. They're in the back of my head. Mm-hmm. But I want to see if that person communicates. If they just make statements or make claims, or do they ask questions, right? And so do they have the right mindset? Are they communicating with me? And during that process, I'm sure I'll ask my questions pretty organically. I'm really just trying to see how well will they communicate? Are they coachable? Do they have adaptability and learning agility? Do they have a consultative approach? That's a huge one right there, right? Because we got to be great consultants to our clients, and give them like a knowledge base. And I have to see if that person has the ability to do those things, adapt, learn, communicate, consult, things like that.
Carrying on a conversation, being consultative, all that sort of stuff. Is that a learned skill? Like, is that something that you're able to teach somebody, or is that easy for people, anyone to be able to pick up, or is that like there's some people who will never be able to be taught those skills?
The way I think about this is a little controversial because people think that you just have to have a natural ability.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think you could be taught anything. I actually proved this with my wife. She didn't believe that she could be an artist. Now she's drawing everything because I made her take classes, right? So like being adaptable, being coachable, being a consultant, it's 100% a learned. I mean, there are people that will naturally have those gifts.
Sure.
But it can be learned just like anything. But if you don't practice it, it's like muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine years ago before Sandler training, I would say I didn't have the confidence to speak to people or to be more communicative with them or to be more coachable or be a consultant. I just didn't have the confidence.
Sure.
So yes, it can be taught, but you just have to have patience and confidence. That's all.
With being coachable, right? Being able to learn to be coachable. I'm sure that there's a lot of personality behind that too, right? Where you have to want it in a certain way, right? You have to be interested in it in order to learn it. But do you think that is like a foundational skill to a salesperson? Like specifically in sales, do they have to be that way, or?
I mean, here's the thing. If you are in sales, there's a reason you're in sales. You just don't go into it because you were a kid and you watched Glenn Ross while your dad was out of the room, right?
Yeah.
It's not. It's the nobody wants to be a salesman. I didn't want to be a salesman. I ran from it, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes you're just naturally like that. Now, I think with anything, it doesn't even matter what it is, sales or art or anything like that, it all comes back to mindset. If you don't have the proper mindset to do it, or you give up easy, right? You have to have persistence. So like I said, it all goes in with the mindset. If you go into something and you give up easily after like the first 2 or 3 no's, you probably are not going to do well in sales, right? But if you have a mindset of like, hey, this is just an objection, this is a number I can get past, and you push yourself to go forward and you build patience in your process, right? Then yes, this is something that's foundational for a salesperson, but I don't think it has to be their passion. I just think they have to have the right mindset for it.
So if being passionate is something that, everyone has to have, and this is probably, again, for everything in life, but we're talking specifically about sales here, right? You have to have a passion for continuing to learn and whatnot. How would you advise someone to do that? It's kind of a tough question to answer, but like, let's say you're trying to give me advice in staying passionate or staying on top of things. How would you advise me to do that? What would you advise me to look for while, avoiding burnout and being overwhelmed and stuff like that?
To stay on top of your craft in sales, it does take a passion. You do have to continuously learn. I would say that staying engaged with people in your, I guess you would say, sales community, right? Constantly asking, what they're doing to, better themselves, what new tools. It's all about kind of staying in a community of like-minded people. Continued education does help, but I would say if it also depends on, how do you want to progress in sales, right? Is this like your ikigai? Is this like your one main purpose in life? Mm-hmm. Or is this just a job, right? So for me, like Martal is like my ikigai. Like I eat, breathe, and sleep this. I don't know why. It's addicting to me, but just staying on top of researching it, right? Mm-hmm. Continuously learning. And I don't necessarily mean you're going to go out and buy a CE course. I'm not even talking about going to like conferences and things, but like staying in touch with groups on LinkedIn or your co salespeople, or just spending good time researching, reading. Research is probably the best, right?
Mm-hmm.
You guys always have to answer a question, how do I produce this booking, right? There's a million ways to skin a cat, but we only rely on one or two, and that's how we get stale. We have to constantly refine and sharpen our competitive axe from time to time, and that means research, learning.
With all of the research that you have to do, try to bank a little bit more on a lot of your operational background now, right? Being
Gotcha.
involved in ops and that, being involved in sales and everything like that. What's your best practice for staying organized with all of that? Because if you think about having all these different cups that you have to kind of constantly keep filled, it's probably impossible to keep all cups filled at the same time. That's how burnout happens. So
It is.
right.
You're 100% right there.
Exactly. So what's your best practices for managing that or staying organized? Or because I know, just for a quick example, right? You told me the other day what your morning routine is. And personally, I found that really interesting. We don't have to dive into it specifically, but I found that really interesting. And I'm very much a person of habit, right? Where I start my day doing X, Y, and Z, knowing that, okay, as long as I get that stuff out of the way, I know I'm going to have at least a more successful day than if I didn't do any of that.
There's a lot of different ways to stay organized. First things first, time block everything.
Okay.
Just everything. Like you said, I have a morning routine. I typically only sleep a couple of hours, so I can start my morning routine, get going, and I stick with it, right? Mm-hmm. So staying organized on your calendar and time blocking for everything. You got a doctor's appointment, time block for it. You have to have a call with your mom, time block for it, time block lunch, whatever. Separate everything into blocks. The other one, I use a ton of screens. I know that's crazy, but I have 4 screens and I run two or three desktops at the same time, which are just 3 different environments to work from.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to have screens, so I would suggest using some sort of task management software. I use ClickUp. I was using Google Tasks, but ClickUp is easy to use.
Yeah.
But the most important is to start. You ever look at social media and you're like, how has this guy got 10,000 followers?
Mm-hmm.
This guy is not that great, right? The only difference is he started first, right? So it's the same thing. You want to get organized and you want to stay on top of it and be super efficient. You have to just start, and you have to build patience into your own processes, not give up whenever something doesn't work, and you continue to address it like you're a first day person. Stay inquisitive, ask questions. I mean, I can't imagine how many questions I've asked Beto over the years. Mm-hmm. I'm just a question guy, but asking questions and staying on top of yourself and being committed to that time organization is just the first step. You have to commit to yourself.
I mean, shoot, there's probably a handful of repetitive questions that I've asked you over the months, right? Just think of all the crazy questions that I've either come to you with or gone to somebody else with, just because it's all in the name of making sure that I'm staying up to date with a lot of this information. But it's we talked about it on the last podcast with Dr. Guy Katz, where he made a mention about you learn. Teaching and learning go hand in hand, because you can kind of translate things to other people in the same way that you learn. So for me, I learn through repetition, and that's how I teach. I will constantly learn a little bit, teach a little bit, learn a little bit, teach a little bit, and then make sure that as I'm going through those motions, that it's always kind of translating one back to another.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. Repetition does work. And you also have people that work, learn differently. There's audio, visual, and kinesthetic learners. I think that the reason why I'm fine with you asking me so many questions is it actually gives me an opportunity to learn you guys, because you guys know I stalk your personalities and your minds like crazy, because I want to know what makes you guys tick and help you guys advance. That's my goal all the time. So I don't shoot down an opportunity to learn something. And that always starts with a question from your side, right? So, and for me, I just had a great mentor that was there to answer my questions whenever I had just the same question over and over again. Thanks, Vito.
Shout out to Vito there. And I like, the mention of time blocking, and I like the mention of, different trackers and stuff like that. I know Notion is another tool that's out there for anybody who's interested in learning about more tools. Ed mentioned ClickUp, there's Google Tasks. I've gotten into the habit a little bit of using like Apple Notes and trackers and reminders and stuff like that. Notion's a great tool. So I would imagine it's all about like finding a good workflow that works for you. Cause like you said, you were on Google Tasks and then you went to ClickUp, right?
I actually, I was doing Google Tasks and trying to find a way to automate it for everybody, but it's just impossible.
Yeah.
But ClickUp was an easy adoption for me because then, my wife uses it. I've seen her use it. Honestly, it's a lifesaver. If you get the extension, anytime you email me and it's a task, I just send it to my task list. So my email actually runs my tasks now through automation.
We've talked about the individual, right? In terms of like, what they should look for, how they should stay organized, stay on top of their craft. So let's flip that for just a second and put yourself in the shoes of a new VP of sales, new VP of sales operations, so on and so forth. Somebody comes to you looking for advice on how to build a sales team. What are you telling them? How are you advising them of that?
So, of course, you're going to try to look for top talent. And you're going to look for people who fit the mold and fit the culture. You're going to go through all the standard steps. But the one thing I would probably say would be good advice for any VP, you have to remember that people work for people. They're just people. So let me explain. In the corporate world, when I was working in a W-2 job and going into the office to my little sales job or operations job, I always asked, what can I do to grow? What can I do to be better? And I asked that from Vito a couple of times when I got here, and he pulled me aside, said, Ed, I want to let you know that if I have an issue with you, I'll tell you right then and there, and I won't let the day close without telling you. I don't like letting things sit on my gut. Since that day, I've changed because I have a constant reminder that people are just trying to figure it out. So you have to have patience with people. Something that is different here at Martal is I'm repeatedly told everybody's get second chances, right? Everybody gets a second chance. It's interesting that you ask that question, and what advice would I give somebody is to be patient with people. They learn differently. They consume information differently. And truthfully, if I wanted to be honest, like a high D personality like I am, that only accounts for like 9% of the world's total population, right? So that must mean that I need to accommodate for the rest.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Ted Lasso?
Of course.
Oh my gosh.
Great show.
Only show I've ever cried during, and I'm kind of upset at Jason Sudeikis for making me cry and not coming back after the last season. Anyway, he says something in there that it should go down in the same, history and documentation of like Walt Whitman and things like that.
Yeah.
He says a saying in there, and it's, I hope that either all of us or none of us are judged by the actions of our weakest moments, but rather by the strength we show when and if we're given a second chance. People are people. That's the advice. Be patient with others.
Well, in advance, I'd like to say thanks for being patient with me. I don't know if you've had to exercise that a whole lot or not, but we're not going to get into that in the podcast.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, and honestly, hopefully everyone who's listening and watching the video and everything like that, hopefully that's that's kind of similar advice that I would give, and I'm sure that anybody would kind of understand and gravitate towards, right? Is to understand that, whether you're starting out and just building a team from scratch or you're trying to expand a team, right? That's something that's there's a lot of human element to what we do as salespeople, to what we do specifically to Martal and lead generation and whatnot. Right. And there's a lot of things that kind of stack up there, and frankly, I see that advice as both for the VP of sales in this scenario and the salespeople. They can kind of
that's 100% true. Honestly, I could probably say that most people at Martal are pretty patient. Mm-hmm. They got to be. I think most of them consider me somewhat of a friend. So they got to be some sort of patient.
I mean,
Anyway.
who wouldn't want to be friends with a guy who has a beard like that? Come on now. On the topic of advice here, kind of another advice question that I would ask you. We're at the time of this recording. It's the week before Thanksgiving here in the States. You know, we're coming up on a holiday season. We're coming up on the end of the year, end of the quarter, on a new year, all that jazz. How do you shift your mindset if there's a shift in mindset? Kind of thinking about the end of the year. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different industries out there that, you know, have ebbs and flows with the holiday season or with the time of year. A lot of, you know, like there's a lot of places that die down, a lot of places that get higher. Sales is kind of all over the place, but does the mindset shift? Does it need to shift? How does that look as we get, you know, what's your advice for that as we get into the end of the year?
Some of our busiest months are December.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there can be plenty of reasons to give not to do something, right? A lot of people gravitate towards holidays, and that's fine. To each their own. But I would say that if you're a salesperson and you're passionate about what you do, or you're a sales leader and you need to get people passionate about what they do, you really have to just kind of reflect on the year success, right? You've got to set goals for Q1, make the conversations about what you've done and what Q1 is going to look like, rather than, hey, it's going to be slow, it's a holiday. That's not, it doesn't really apply, at least not here, right? You just stay on top of your team and keep them motivated. I mean, this is a great time. Yeah, you're going to be selling, but I mean, you'll be able to take off, have time with your family. And I'm sure a lot of people are freeing up their time, and truthfully, I get a lot of people on the phone during these times too. So it's all on how you present or set the stage for your people if you're a leader, right? And it's all about how you address your own personal goals as a person. If you have goals to sell a certain limit, like, I mean, I'm not saying that applies here, but let's say you have, a certain quota you want to meet by the end of the year being a salesperson. Sometimes you got to do things that other people don't want to do. That means working through the holiday season while everybody else is taking off, right? So I would say, just keep your people in the same loop and make sure they're speaking the same words and doing the same things. That's all.
And it seems like there's kind of like that common theme here, right? Where it's like staying on top of your passions or staying on top of, to kind of frame that a little bit differently. It's understanding your like why, right? You've probably seen those phrases before.
Simon Sinek, you're getting into the epiphany bridge.
Right. That's exactly it.
Right.
It's understanding your why and why you're doing this, right? And you kind of made the mention at the beginning, like I would imagine, right? Probably 99% of people don't like go to college or go to school or even just kind of like graduate and say, I want to be in sales. Like, this is what I want to do. There's probably a small subsection of people that do, and kudos to them, right? But you kind of like fall into sales for lack of a better phrase, but you have to still carry passion as to why you decided to kind of fall into sales, or why sales is something you decided to kind of start chasing down, right?
It is, you're right. It's all about staying on top of that passion and having the right mindset to produce a result, not just because you got to produce a result, because you want to produce a solid result for a client, right? Put quality in your work and stay passionate about it.
We're kind of getting down towards the end of time here, Ed, and I really appreciate, kind of all the answers and insight that you've had. Like I said at the beginning, normally we have outside people that kind of give their advice, but we've got a lot of, smart people, in my opinion, within Martal that I think have a lot to offer and kind of put out there into the world. So I want to give you the floor, like I do with all of my other guests here on the Fireside Chat, give you the floor for just a minute or two. If you have any last minute words of advice, any last minute, thoughts or kind of things that you'd like to put out there into the world for all of the listeners, the floor is yours.
Always be awesome.
Always be awesome.
That's my advice, right?
I love that.
Have you ever seen How I Met Your Mother? He's like, always be awesome. He even has a motivational poster. I mean, it's true. Why would you ever have a reason not to be awesome?
Got a good point there.
I mean, wake up and be successful. Help others be successful. Help others grow.
I wish I had like a marker board in my office that I could like write that down. Maybe I'll just get like a Post-it note and put that on my
You could actually buy that motivational poster.
The one from How I Met Your Mother? That's perfect.
Yeah, you can. You can get it. The jet one.
I'll have to put that in a link down below.
Yeah.
That way anyone listening or watching can go and find that poster. That's perfect. Well, Ed, thank you, man. Thank you for hopping on here and having a little fireside chat with me. I thought this was great, and hopefully the listeners and the viewers out there thought the same thing. Getting a chance to hear your perspective and everything. I'm sure that there's a lot deeper conversation or even just longer conversation we can go into, because there's a lot of stuff that
Probably.
we didn't even touch, right? And
Right.
maybe a future episode, right? Maybe we'll come back to this a little bit later. For now, I really appreciate it, guys. This is Edd Young, Ed with 2 D's, an amazing beard, and our vice president of sales operations here at the Martal Group. So thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Really appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to a future conversation here, man.
Cool. Thanks.
Shout out once again to Ed for spending some time with us on this fireside chat. Ed's one of those professionals that just has a wealth of information locked up in his head. So I hope you got just a small taste of that. If you have a favorite part that you enjoyed, feel free to leave a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on this chat with Edd Young. Be sure to like the video, consider hitting the subscribe button, and turn on the notifications so you can be alerted to when future chats go live on our channel. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy hunting.